I'm Ben Kent, Director of Meridian West. Today we'll be discussing how professionals should be communicating with their clients since COVID-19. There's been a big shift to online with the rise of Zoom and digital events. But when the lockdown is lifted, will professionals revert to more traditional ways of communicating, face-to-face meetings, seminars and conferences? To discuss this issue, I have a team of experts. Richard Silverman, who's the Creative Director at Brand Remedy. Christina Black-Laws, former President of the Law Society. Gemma Prescott, Head of Business Development for Advanced Delivery and Solutions at Allen & Overy. And finally, Edward Peck, who's co-founder of the International Asset Finance Network.
So open up the debate. So Ed, now given the kind of focus on sort of shifting in-person events to online, what's your experience been? Because obviously you're trying to set up a conference and you're facing this issue right now.
Hello Ben, I run a conference which is focused on the auto finance industry, and in particular we examine how technology is transforming the way in which auto finance companies are doing business. And the topic of digitalization comes up a great deal, and one of the findings that comes out of all of our discussions pretty much is that digitalization really isn't about replicating the offline process online. That's a mistake. And that for us was one would think that we would avoid those problems, but we didn't. We fell for them as our first step in the journey. And the technology platforms that deliver conferences help you to make that mistake. To go and talk to the platform providers, they literally map the one-to-one on all the elements that they think conference is about, and they've got it wrong. So we look at the stands, for example, in a standard conference, and they say, well, we can create these wonderful stands, and you look at them and they're really microsites. And as you start to think about it, you realize that they don't really offer anything more than the websites that the companies have already got. So they're bad. I guess that the only value I could see in them is that you could go onto these virtual stands and you could apply to get the goodie bag that people hand to you as you wander past the stand, and you get that sent to you. But other than that, I can't see any difference with their websites. They're less good, and they don't have all the machinery and the investment that they had. And then you look at things like the members lounges, which are even worse. They are supposed to help you delegates interact with other delegates, and if you're a teenager who wants to chat to people that they don't know through instant messaging platforms, then they'll work very well for you. But I really just don't see those things working.
So all those cool features that Alice was talking about, you're saying don't be dazzled by those. So what is the best approach? How do you communicate online?
Well, I think what you've got to do is to find a way of building relationships with people, and the game changer is really about doing what you were doing offline and getting wrong, easing those pain points when you take the process online. And if you think about what people do in conferences, content consuming is only one of those things, and it's not really even the top thing that people try to do. We group together the top things that people are trying to do under the title of conferring, and it's a slightly clever phrase, or not so clever phrase, it's not ours, but what people do at conferences is to confer, and it applies an evenness of relationship between the delegates and the people that they're interacting with. And it's not at all like the traditional conference platform where everything is geared to keeping you quiet during the presentation, and then you're allowed to tap a question into a Q&A box and the speaker can ignore it if they want to. So, those sorts of interactions don't lack the richness that you need from a good conference platform that allows you to confer. So conferring would mean networking, finding your next job, doing all those things that are around building a relationship. So what we are doing in our process is to start each event by encouraging the delegates to self-reveal, and that means very much, as your video said, getting people into small groups and asking them to introduce themselves, who they are, what they want to get from the conference, how they think they can contribute to the content, and really getting to know them in the way that you would get to know somebody if they come to a small meeting. And this has implications on the number of people you can take through that process.
So keep it small.
Keep it small and intimate, because the standard technology that applies to a conference blocks that sort of rich interaction that actually is the value that they're trying to get out of it. Now, the other thing that's got to go is a standard presentation format. It really doesn't work online to have somebody who talks and the only way you can ask them a question is to tap something in online. So what we're beginning to see is a much more flat structure in which, again, as your video talked about, you have breakout rooms, and you've got to allocate roles within those breakout rooms. So there's an obvious place for technology providers and indeed lawyers to go to. They can be expert witnesses in a breakout conversation. And the key skills that a conference provider needs to have is to add the process on top and to facilitate those conversations. And the advantage of all that
unknown participant is now exiting.
The advantage of that is that you can create flexibility in what you're doing. So for us, the key implications of this transition online is not to look at the webcast and the conference going technology. It's to look at that rich layer below it, which is about meeting invitations. And critically, the function that we're talking about is one that you mentioned for Hopin and for Zoom. It's the ability to move between very large groups and into breakout sessions where people can have intimate and quiet conversations. And you begin the job of conferring. So you allow the delegates to do lots and lots of interaction. And then after the event, you give them the tools to carry on those conversations on a one-to-one basis.
It sounds like quite a lot of skill is required, and it's really being thoughtful about it and less about big conference broadcast and more towards how do you get that kind of intimate meeting. Richard, I'd like to get your perspective on that. Do you agree with Ed? What have you seen?
Yeah, absolutely. Said we're finding the same sort of thing being talked about across various industries, and I think we're probably talking about the same thing here, Ed. But my language would be ahead of any conference or event that we lean into a kind of pre-engagement process. If you think about, in the previous life, you simply had, registration for an event, very simple process. That could become a much richer experience. It could involve attendees starting to talk about the topics and the subjects they want to talk about and finding like-minded people and creating that almost like curation of your own agenda for an event, which would lead to, I believe, those kind of richer interactions. So I think the whole world of video calling is kind of in a sense it's there's loads of choice out there, but actually it's still in its infancy, I believe, because they pretty much all offer the same thing. And I don't think yet I've seen an example where the user experience has really been mapped out in detail, and I think that's what's required to create a much more engaging and
almost a client journey, really.
Totally. As you would do, as you would, frankly, with any campaign. You think about what are the touch points through that campaign, and how do you maximize the client engagement. So yeah, I think it's a huge area, and it's something we're actually looking at, and it's going to be interesting because there is a whole world of live events out there that will need to be replicated online in one shape or form or the other, and there's some interesting things already going on. There's examples, for instance, using a completely different industry. If you think about the automotive industry, huge global brands like Porsche are already effectively doing showroom experiences online. So you create a meeting, your initial contact is with a receptionist or somebody who welcomes you. Can't quite give you a cup of coffee, but it's as good as. And then they literally introduce you to the car salesman who's holding his iPhone and will walk you and talk you around the car, sit you inside it, etc., etc.
So, Jem, I just want to bring you in here because live virtual events is one aspect, but I suppose even more profound for professionals is how do you build that personal relationship? Because when I was a young lawyer, so much of the relationship with the client was built over through meetings, having bad pizza when you're signing the deal. That's when the kind of bright ideas kind of sparked out, and that's hard to achieve virtually. What's your thought on that?
Thanks, Ben. Good morning, everybody. I think to think about this in two sections, there's a sort of marketing and business development angle, and then there's the delivery on matter, if you like. And I'm really interested to hear, Ed's view on conferencing. I think from the marketing perspective, I would caution professionals from forgetting that basic technology, the telephone. There's lots of great content being put out there, social, email marketing, but it risks, clients still want to get to know the individual that they're going to be working with. And so it risks, I think, people hiding behind what might otherwise feel like a bit of a generic proposition. So picking up the phone is still key. I think thinking about the value as an advisor that you can really bring is important, and to do that well, you need to, one of the challenges is I think you need to really understand the situation that your client finds themselves in, particularly in sort of crisis environment. And so how you have that conversation to get that understanding is going to be important. And
Right.
I think it's difficult to
Is
do
now
that
exiting.
sort of just online. That said, I think there will be, on matter, I think there will be positives that come out of this, and it will sort of
Is now
encourage
joining.
clients and law firms to look at adoption of technologies that they might not have done. But for me, it's going to be about a blend. The technology will get us so far. And I think thinking about customer journeys and the experience online is going to be really important. But we are going to have to find a way, as you say, Ben, on matter, to not lose the nuance and the collaboration and the debate and the sorts of softer side of things, Ed, that you talked about, really managing to get that confer within a conference.
And I think I totally agree with you, Gemma, because I think the research we've done, so we've researched kind of clients' openness to using digital solutions, and it really divides clients. It really does. Private clients are on average much more resistant. Large corporates, the big banks, are the early adopters. A lot of it comes down to the mindset and the personality of the individual. It's not straightforward. Christina, can I bring you in here? Because when you were president of the Law Society, technology and innovation was very much at the forefront of your presidency. But there's actually been quite slow adoption of some of these advanced tools, 10%, 20% of law firms. Is this going to be the final catalyst that we're going to see big transformation, or will people just hunker down and cut costs?
Well, Ben, we've been heralding this for a very long time, haven't we? So I hope it isn't yet another brave new dawn, and that actually there is this opportunity now. And I call it an opportunity. There's nothing certain here. So, of course, as we know, the technology has never been the problem. It has always been about the firm or the business culture and the lack of willingness often to adopt. And I hear this time and again. I chair 2 government panels in the law tech space now, and I hear it time and again from law tech startups, scale-ups, that the challenge of trying to move a really great project from one team to another team
Is now exiting.
They're back to square one. So the technology isn't the issue. The problems are the same. The challenges are the same as we have been experiencing for some time. The difference is that COVID has provided us with the burning platform.
Yes.
That catalyst that's required for step change. And I non-exec for a number of large law firms, and what I think I've found to date is that those legal businesses who were more technologically advanced, no surprise, have been the ones who have found it an awful lot easier to adapt to the new world order. And I think that's going to play out when we move on into phases 2 and phase 3, so the sort of the more long-term issues around how we engage with our clients and also how we deliver services to our clients. So again, I think it's those firms and those legal businesses who are really willing to challenge themselves and their colleagues to be brave and to be bold about technological solutions, disruptive, creative ways of engaging and delivering services. And those are the firms that are going to thrive.
And there's so much technology out there. Are there any technologies you think are going to really break through that will have the potential to really change things?
I think personally, when we get to the next iteration of what we're doing now, that's going to be the real game changer.
Yeah.
When we can feel like we're sitting in the same room as somebody. At the moment, the technology, it's okay, but we're all a bit frustrated, and frankly, we're all a bit bored with it by now. We've done enough of these conferences and meetings online. So that shift,
that's interesting.
I think, will be the thing, because our business, all of our businesses, is about communicating and engaging. And
okay, so not the AI, the document review, it's the communication tools. Hey, now it was a danger we kind of talk in the professional services echo chamber. You're an actual client. What's your impression? Do you value that in-person interaction, and what would you value?
Yeah, I do value tech, but it's got to be efficient and effective and fit for the purpose, and not technology for the sake of technology. So a little bit like the mini websites, microsites on the stands. That sort of innovation is nonsense, and nobody wants it. And we certainly don't want high-paying lawyers to start to engage in those sort of poor, lacking in rich interactions. So, you've got to be very, very clear on what your technology is trying to do, and make sure that it does it in a way that the customers need. It meets those customers' needs. That's the key thing.
What's your view of how professionals interact with you at the moment, how they use technology? Is it a kind of happy experience?
Not terribly. I find that they're tech dinosaurs. Very often they don't adopt the obvious technology that will make life easier, so they're slow to use even stuff like email and web conferencing even more so. So I sense a reluctance to use the things that are already proven effective technology tools.
Perfect. Now we're coming up to 5:30. This is going to be a really rich discussion, but now I wanted to make this an opportunity for the participants who are on the call.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
If you want to stay on and want to ask a question for the panel, please use the chat function to do that. In the meantime, I'm going to ask some of my favourite questions, which is, we've sketched out the broad landscape. What if you were managing partner of a firm? What would you be doing now? What would your priorities be? Gemma, the Magic Circle firm.
I would for us, it's been thinking about, if to go back to the brand question, our brand, I think, is quite tightly aligned around providing a very global service. And so we've been thinking about, when we're advising clients during this crisis period, how we can really try to do that in a way that is beneficial from a global perspective, and challenging the type of marketing that we do to really deliver that. And the other, another key element of our brand, Ben, as you sort of kindly said, is on the innovation side of things. And for us, it's always been, yes, we are delighted to help work with clients for them to deliver their technology for them, but it is as much about us transforming our business internally. And so that internal engagement and adoption remains key. And that's where, the current environment, I think, Christina, to your point, does present a real opportunity. So keeping focused on that, keeping listening is really, it's an obvious point, but key, I think, to getting it right.
Keep listening, but really grapple with the brand. This is your opportunity. Richard, I imagine you would agree with that, being a brand man.
Totally, music to my ears, as always. Yeah, I think it's very interesting, because there's this sense at the moment that this is not a great time to be going out and kind of selling stuff, because there's bigger things at play, and therefore a lot of the thinking is around organisations kind of putting their human face forward, and that's almost more important. So whether you're a huge global organisation or a much smaller regional law firm, to do things that demonstrate you care about your community, to do things that demonstrate that your brand purpose or your mission statement is relevant in today's uncharted waters. Is that still as it should be? I think there's probably space for a lot of organizations to just kind of do a sense check on their brand and say, are we saying exactly what we should be saying at this moment in time? Is there a need to just tweak and move some of our positioning or thinking to reflect the current situation? And then that rolls into something else that I think is beginning to be spoken about, which is, when we do get to a point where actually a level of normality resumes and there is the opportunity to go back to work in the way in which we have traditionally been used to going to work, will employees want to do that, or will they actually at some stage in the future turn around to employers and say, you know what, I think I'm actually of greater benefit to you, my employer, working remotely. I can be more productive. I can feel better about it because I'm producing a greener footprint, and I want to change the way in which I work with the organisation. I think some of that also is going to start to inform people's thinking in terms of actually, the employer brand as well. And I think there's some big questions down the line.
Perfect. There's a question which has come in, which is, it's from Andy Knox, and it's there's a general sense that there's going to be a percentage reduction in marketing budgets, which I think is a bit of a good kind of reality check, because we've painted quite a kind of positive picture of transformation. Yeah. So what should the remaining marketing budget be focused on? Gemma, you're in marketing. What's your view on that? Because is there a cut in marketing? And if so, what should be cut and what should be developed?
Great question. Thank you, Andy Knox. So, yeah, I think it would be right to, in the current environment, expect a sort of caution with major elements of spend. I think in terms of what people should focus the remaining budget on. I mean, in the short term, actually, what we've seen within our firm is less elements that require significant spend, but just really getting the coordination right. I think we're very aware that it's easy for people to end up unintentionally perhaps bombarding clients with materials and ideas and suggestions. So a lot of our effort has been about trying to streamline and coordinate and reduce the volume of comms going out the door. I think longer term, what might be interesting is if there is a shift towards services being delivered more, online or in digital forms, then thinking about the skill set within teams. Ben, and you and I had a little chat about this, whether we see a change in that and looking for people with more traditional marketing experience, if you like, rather than sort of what we might call business development or even, more of a sales skill. So that might be a sort of change in longer term trend. But I think for us,
Gemma, I suppose the sales skills is an interesting one, because I imagine if people are developing kind of online services, that lends itself to a very different approach to selling than selling a partner's expertise.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about my own firm, we've had an online services business for 15 years or so, AOsphere, and within that bit of the business, there is a business development team that is much more akin, I think, to a sales team that you'd find in a traditional corporate, and and that exists perfectly happily alongside the more traditional element of the A&O business. But I would expect to see more of that, I think, in the future. But for us, coordination, clarity, getting the comms sort of right in the near term has probably been the focus.
Not blitzing people. Interesting. And Christina, if you were to go back and become managing partner, and you've got this terrible balance, but probably never again.
No, I think it's a really challenging time to be in leadership roles, full stop. That's way beyond our profession. But I do think it is all about getting the strategy right. And for me, there are two limbs to this. The first is the one we've been talking about, which is around being innovative and creative. What are we going to market, sell, develop to our clients? These are the discussions that I think the future focus businesses need to be having right now, because there will be a next normal post COVID, and it is not going to be the same as it was. But the second, and this is to pick up on something that Richard said, which I think is really important, is that we need to be much more focused on being values driven businesses. So what are the things that are at the sort of the beating heart of the business? What is the why of the business? And how do we actually align that with our clients so that we can focus around those sort of central values themes?
Excellent. And Ed, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
So you've got a dramatic career change, and you suddenly find yourself managing part of a professional firm.
Good luck.
What's an outsider's got a fresh broom that you would bring?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I know what the answers are, but it's about focusing on delivering the very simple and straightforward things that I, as a client, need, and using the technology to do that better. So
to get back to clients,
where I would be.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. So I think, this fantastic debate, because I think the kind of what I've taken from this is actually this is a time to really reappraise what you are as a business, and not just firefight, but to kind of focus on your priorities. It does feel like this is going to be, you can communicate digitally, but don't over blitz people, as Gemma said. Keep the personal, kind of the personality coming through, which was Richard saying. I think Ed was saying you've got to be really thoughtful about how you do it. Don't just take the latest technology and apply it. You've got to be really thoughtful about the client journey. And also from the kind of fundamental delivery, feels like a bunch of new skills are required, and this probably will be the catalyst for a kind of transformation. And it feels like it's really about understanding the client journey, and it's not really whizzy technology, but some collaboration tools and video tools, which actually could have the biggest impact. So I think some great sort of lessons there. Now we are going to do a video of this, which we're going to put online, and we'll sort out. I know there was issues with the video we said before with the Wi-Fi, those teenagers on their gaming devices. We'll sort that out, and so the whole video will go up online on YouTube in the next day or two. And also, we've got more of these webinars coming up. So next Tuesday, it's all about thought leadership. So everyone's been talking about COVID. I think we'll soon get a bit bored of that. So what are the topics that you should be talking about? And we've got a great panel for that one as well. We've got Matt Baldwin from Coast Communications. We've got Suzanne Snowden from Message Consulting, who used to run all PwC's thought leadership. And we've got Amir Hassan from Deloitte. So that should be another great discussion. And I just want to thank the panelists. Thanks so much for your time. Really great debate and excellent. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.